I was reading a book to my kids the other night and I was reminded of just how much brains, particularly dyslexic brains when it comes to language, love to take shortcuts. The book that we were reading was Pete the Cat and the Substitute Teacher, which is the one where, if you haven't read it, his mom is the substitute teacher at his school, and somehow she takes them to the wrong classroom over and over again for the entire day, to the point where they miss art, which is what they wanted to do all along. And so at the end of the book, Pete says, well, why don't we just make art here in our classroom? Sounds like a great idea. So they go about starting to make these paper cats to say thank you to his mom for being the substitute teacher. And as I was reading it, I read that as they started making paper airplanes. And I turned the page and continued on, and then my 7-year-old was like, no, cats, not airplanes. And I was totally unaware that I had not read that correctly, because apparently my brain, as it was reading that, having read it a bunch of times before, as I was reading it, it was like, oh, if they're making something with paper, it's got to be an airplane, right? We'll just say that. Wrong. They weren't making paper airplanes, they were making paper cats. But that's a great example of how dyslexic brains, when they're working on reading something, they will just fill in blanks. They'll be like, logically, this is what I think should be coming next. And that's easier than trying to decode it. Let's just substitute it and call it a day. And when I'm reading with my kids, they catch it and they point it out. But when I'm reading by myself, or when I'm trying to proofread something that I read, I don't always, in fact, often I would argue, I don't catch those things. And that's why, that's one of the reasons that dyslexic individuals can struggle to always comprehend things perfectly, because sometimes we're not even reading the words right. Our brains are like, here's what I think should be there, so we're just going to say that is what's there, even if that isn't necessarily what's there.